I am calling to order the school committee public choice hearing on May 29th at 6:07 p.m. All of the members of the school committee are in attendance, and we are here to hear from the community and the public about the issue of school choice. I'm going to let Dr. Evans introduce school choice, and I'll talk a little bit about attendance and enrollment in the district. Dr. Evans?
Thank you. The school choice option has been available in the Commonwealth for many years, and it is designed to provide opportunities for students who may wish to go across communities to attend school in a different district, a different school district. Every year, every public school district needs to have the school committee vote whether or not participation in school choice is appropriate for that district. There's an assumed participation if you don't vote to the contrary. And so when the school committee makes a decision about school choice, the most important thing is looking at available seats. In districts with declining enrollment, there may be available seats at some grade levels in some schools. But as you know from my repeated presentations to you, our district is a growing district. We are over capacity at every school, and we lack seats to take school choice students. Once you have taken a school choice student, that student is entitled to remain through graduation. And so while there is some funding that comes from the state to accompany school choice students, I strongly recommend to the school committee that we opt out of school choice, do not participate, and do not accept school choice students, simply because we have no space for those students.
So we have school choice here today. We have noticed this to the public in advance and offered attendance to this meeting publicly. It is anyone can join at any time, and right now I am not seeing any members of the community who are in attendance to ask questions. So with seeing lack of community interest and questions on this issue, I think that we are able. Yeah, Chris?
Just two quick comments. Just to that last point, in all my years, I've actually never seen a member of the public come to speak during a public choice hearing. So I just want to be clear, it's actually not typical. So we shouldn't feel bad or alarmed that nobody's with us tonight, given we're having to do this remotely. And I really appreciate Michelle, you and Judy and Frida doing everything you need to do to set this up and advertise to stay within the letter of the law. I was also just going to offer my understanding of the statute is that we not only need to vote to opt out of, if we choose to opt out of choice, we also need to state the reason why as a part of the motion. So typically we would say that a member might forward a motion that we opt out of school choice for the 2020-21 school year due to lack of available space for students.
Is that a motion, Chris? Because I'll second it.
I'm happy to make that motion unless there was other discussion or contribution. I just wanted to get that out on the table.
We're still in the hearing.
We do need to close the hearing, yeah.
I was going to say, but before we make the motion, we'll need to close the hearing. So I was just trying to give it a few more minutes to make sure, since this is a unique platform and no one has joined us, so I will take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, we have to do roll call on this format.
Aye.
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 Karen?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the public hearing on school choice is closed, and now I will call to order the school committee meeting of May 29th. I'm calling school committee meeting to order at 6:12 p.m. On tonight's agenda are just two things. One is our vote on school choice following the public hearing. And the second item on the agenda is a bit of new business that Mr. has brought before us about the warrant article for town meeting. It is a timely piece of information that we did need to add quite quickly to make sure that we have all the information about the warrant article on Morocco and are able to choose whether to vote favorable action on that tonight, so that we have that information for town meeting members. First, we will take up the vote on school choice. Is there any discussion on school choice this evening? Seeing no discussion from members, I'll take a motion on school choice.
I'm happy to move that the school committee decline school choice for the 2020-2021 school year due to a lack of available space for students.
Second.
May I ask this point of, just to be clarify, a yes vote in your motion would be to not have school choice? Just want to make sure we're crystal clear.
We typically, there is a motion to decline. We have to definitively say we wish not to participate.
Perfect. I just want to be clear on that.
Yep.
Thank you.
So all in favor, a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. So Chris's motion passes, and we have declined school choice for the 2020-2021 school year. Now I would like to turn it over to Mr. Nixon for a minute. You received the article information on the Morocco work last night at the meeting. Mr. Nixon sent the finalized copy of that to everyone today. Chris, would you like to walk us through it real quickly?
Sure, and all I'm doing right now is I'm on the town meeting page at winchester.us, so you all should have seen that link and perhaps gotten a message from Mr. Toogood today that that's up there. So the motion, the article and the motion unchanged from our meeting yesterday. The background's quite lengthy, so I won't go into it in great detail. You know, the purpose of the background, both on this article and the one that precedes it, is to really make clear to town meeting members and anybody who's watching our real commitment towards an eventual replacement for both the Lynch and the Morocco schools. But in particular, with respect to Article 10, we're clarifying that we would welcome support on the part of town meeting for $30,000 for architectural and engineering consulting services for the Morocco school, and that would include some on-site observations, review and analysis of our VFA facility database. That would involve meetings with, for instance, Mr. Lawson, Mr. Gill, with Judy, with Principal West and others, to help us kind of prioritize and understand what the real needs are at Morocco. I'll remind the committee that we've talked back in February about, I think we all kind of have a consensus or an understanding that we could easily spend $2, $3, or $4 million at Morocco over the next 2, 3, or 4 years. I think the question that we all need some help with is it $2 million over 4 years, or is it $4 million over 2 years? Those are two really different numbers. One might be a stretch from the stabilization funds, the other really wouldn't be. So if there are enough serious and important needs that we want to act on more quickly, then that would drive a conversation about really kind of a packaged project that might even require a debt exclusion override. There's just no way we can really have those conversations without having some more information and guidance on what those priorities are. And that not only includes an understanding of what we need to do and why, but also kind of an explanation and understanding of what the risks are, either in postponing some much needed work or perhaps not doing it at all, with this idea towards an eventual replacement of Morocco. So at the end of the day, what we're really focused on is coming to a better understanding of what's necessary to continue to sustain Morocco as a great place for teaching and learning. And we wanted to do this fairly quickly. This is a great opportunity Mr. Betancourt has made for us in getting an article in right before the warrant closed. In that we look to get some feedback and a preliminary report before the end of August. That's huge because the planning cycle starts this summer. We did have a capital planning meeting this week. This just occurred to me. You know, as I think I mentioned yesterday, capital planning voted unanimously to recommend favorable action on this article. They're pleased that we're making this attempt to fund this, and they're pleased to know that we might have this input before the capital cycle closes.
So if anybody has any questions for Mr. Nixon, otherwise I think what we would be looking towards is a school committee vote also on favorable action regarding this article. But I will certainly be happy to have myself or Mr. Nixon or Dr. Evans answer any questions before we go forward.
Good question.
Yeah, Brian?
Chris, this is a really simple question. The scope of work that will be done, I think I understand it pretty well. The decision to move forward on any work at a later date, first of all, it's not tied to this. Those will be their own funding mechanism and everything. But also, they will be dependent on what information we have at that point as far as the remaining expectation of using Morocco. That is, whether at that point we may or may not know whether Morocco is going to be needed for 5 more years or 10 more years, for instance. So I assume that any work that gets recommended out of this study will also take into account new information. For instance, from the Lynch feasibility study that says, say, we're going to tear down Lynch. So now we know that Morocco needs to last longer than if we're going to keep the existing Lynch. I don't know if there's really a question or more just it seems like it'll be different things we need to do if we need it for 5 more years versus if we need it for 10 more years.
So I appreciate that. I think the best way I could answer that would be I feel like we have some acknowledgement as a committee, and I'd be eager to hear what Dr. Evans thinks about this as well. A new Lynch is going to come before a new Morocco, whether we like that or not, because we've just started, albeit it's a lengthy process, we've just started a process with the state. And while we would certainly be hopeful someday to be able to partner with the state on a new Morocco, if not, we may have to, as Dr. Evans has said before, we may even have to self-fund. In either one of those scenarios, whether we're partnering or we're self-funding, I certainly can't imagine a new Morocco before the fall of 25, which is kind of what we've drafted out with some MSBA input, right? So the work scope that we have in the draft form that you may recall from February specifically notes that we're looking towards a new Lynch by the fall of 25, and only thereafter would we have a new Morocco. Now, whether we would have already started down a path towards a new Morocco before Lynch opens, or we start then, I think to your point, that's yet to be seen. Ms. Whittemore has expressed an interest in reaching out to the MSBA we already let them know a month ago that we were wondering about the possibility of hanging on to the original Lynch to use as swing space, but we also recognize there is cost that would then be on us to take it down later, and that's not cheap. We have to abate the building, we'd have to tear it down, you restore the site, and for those who are familiar with the master plan, although there is a way to build a new Lynch directly across from the existing, we have very little in the way of open play space and play structures, right? I mean, the idea is you sort of put a building where the play structures are today, and then you put the play structures where the building is today. You sort of trade one, right, for the other. So this is a long way of saying that what Ellen and I have discussed is having a follow-up conversation with the MSBA to help them understand that we actually really do want to look closely at Morocco and understand, at least at a very high level, high altitude, are there other options towards supporting a Morocco reconstruction other than hanging on to Lynch? And so the most obvious option that I think we've talked about in some respects is this idea of maybe a new Morocco on Leonard Field. And then we trade a school building for a field. That's certainly less intrusive on the Morocco community and less cost for busing and so forth. So these are important questions that we need to have a little bit of help on to analyze. So you're right on point. I don't know that would take a terribly long time. We haven't started it yet. We frankly just wanted the MSBA to know that we felt we needed to ask some of those questions internally, and that might even involve reaching out to a consultant. They were totally understanding. They were on board with that. They thought that seemed really reasonable. I don't know if Ellen wants to weigh in more on that, but I think it'd be important to follow up with them, and then perhaps we could hear from Dr. Evans on her thoughts as well, just about the timing of Morocco.
Sure. So during our conversation that we had with the MSBA a few weeks ago, and I really want to thank Mr. Nixon for his time and his really all of his involvement with this, because his area of expertise really is the master plan and in the school buildings. So the MSBA reiterated again what they've been saying to me since the very beginning of my time in Winchester is that they very much appreciate being told what our story is and where we are with things, and the communication that they've had from the district has really helped them understand that we are and continue to be one of the few districts in the Commonwealth that are seeing significant enrollment growth. So for them to fully understand that, yes, they've invited us into eligibility on a Lynch, but yes, we still are looking forward to where we would go with a Morocco is important. So I think that for them to continue to hear from us and to continue to know what our story is definitely going to help us in the long run.
Thank you.
Dr. Evans, did you have anything to add?
I think Brian's initial question was, will the consultant hired to do this prioritize for both 5 and 10 year scenarios? And I think what Mr. Nixon is pointing out is that there's going to be at least a 6 or 7 year time period before anything is even in consideration in terms of replacing Morocco. So, but I think it will be important to set the expectations of the committee for options related to the major systems. The other thing I think that's always important to keep in mind is we have a decision to make about whether we want to pursue an accelerated repair through MSBA for any of the major systems work that we're doing at Morocco, whether it's roof or boiler or windows. And that will defray some of the costs, and they will only participate with us if they believe that we're going to hold on to the building for a certain period of time. And that it will be used as a school. And so all of those pieces have to fit together before any recommendation is made for the town to fund any major repairs at Morocco. And so that's sort of a fail-safe for us, because we have to ask that question: how long are we anticipating holding on to this building? Are we going to self-fund? It could be that a few years from now, we have many more housing units in town than even we anticipate now, which would be shocking to us, but that could happen. And it could be that we need to renovate Morocco and build a third school. There are all sorts of scenarios that could come into play in the next decade for schools in Winchester. And so I think we've got to consider all possibilities and be sure that any investment we make in the building results in better educational experiences for students and or energy savings, and prolongs the life of the useful life of the building. Buildings the age of Lynch and Morocco have gone past their useful life for most major systems, and also no longer align with educational needs. The cafegimatorium, for example, at Morocco, the open classroom design that was somewhat enclosed at some point. And so we have educational needs that if we were building a brand new school, it would look different from Morocco. All of that being said, I've said this repeatedly, Morocco is a well-maintained building. And while there are certainly things that could be addressed and should be addressed, when we open in the fall, students will have a great educational experience there, in a safe and clean and as well maintained as we can manage for an older building. And so I don't want anyone to think that there are emergency needs at Morocco that will need immediate attention. Rather, we're trying to be really planful, and that's what this effort is, and I support it.
And I'll look for other questions. I'm going to remind the committee too. It's really easy for us to get into Lynch when we start talking about Morocco. Tonight's agenda item is only item 10, which is the Morocco, the warrant article pertaining to repairs, the engineering study pertaining to repairs at Morocco. So I don't want to get too far into Lynch tonight, just as a reminder. Did anybody have any other questions about Article 10? Karen.
I just had a quick question. I was wondering, assuming that this moves forward, what do you perceive as the timeline for this? Is this like a short order project?
The first question.
So we do, certainly our hope is that we could bring in a consultant team that's very familiar with the district and familiar with our buildings. We've got some options there. The team that worked on the master plan that's engaged on the call right now includes a mechanical engineer, which were actually last engaged at Morocco when we did the space reconfiguration back in 2009. So in fact, some of the same team members, so they're familiar with it. We've had some preliminary conversations just to get a sense about really two things, Karen. I mean, one is sort of workload and availability, but the other is with COVID, a lot of offices are closed right now. But given the governor's direction, literally the tables are being rearranged in offices and folks are coming back. And the general impression I have in the AE world is folks are hungry. Number of large public projects have gone on hold. Some international work is obviously iced right away. So my sense is that there's a real hunger and appetite to do this kind of stuff, but yes, to get it done quickly and by the end of August. And Michelle, can I just underscore a point that Dr. Evans just made? I think is really important. When she spoke about the accelerated repair option through the MSBA, I want to remind this group that a prior school committee once considered accelerated repair. I think it was for the roof at Winchester High School, and actually opted not to do it for a reason that Judy was alluding to, which is the MSBA has no interest in doling out $2, $3, or $4 million to put into a school building and then have a district come back in short order and say we want to tear it down and replace it. So out of that very concern, Winchester school committees in the past have said we're gonna play the long game and not do that. The last time we did a an accelerated repair program was a replacement of the roof at Lynch, and that was a few years ago. And that made sense because our priorities at the time were focused on VO and the high school. So that's just something for us to keep in mind. That's certainly an option for us for funding, but then it raises other questions in terms of the big picture.
Zena, were you waiting for a question or
Yeah.
was it an answer?
Karen, are you done? I didn't know if Karen had him. So my question is for Chris. Thank you so much for all of this information. Your expertise has been very helpful to help me put it all in order in my head. I wanted to understand a little better. I'm touching on Lynch, but not getting into Lynch, so bear with me. But is there a way to tie in or to bring together the feasibility study at Lynch? Would this come before that or after that? I'm just thinking that logically, the more information we have on both kind of at the same time helps direct us to that path that is best for our community. So kind of like the workshop thing I keep throwing out there. It's important in my head for us to understand both projects kind of simultaneously. So do you see this coming after the feasibility study? Do you see this as kind of informing some of the conversations we'll have around the feasibility? Does that make sense? Because if there is any way to self-fund a double school, let's pretend that they'll fund the Lynch piece and some magic happens and we can fund the Morocco piece. Tying them in might save us costs. I have so many questions, and I'm just wondering what order do we take them in terms of the studies?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question,
Okay.
and it makes sense. It's actually a really easy question to answer, not so much because of this kind of self-directed Morocco scenario that we hope passes on the 8th. It's actually easy to answer because of our MSBA project on Lynch, and that is that we're actually not even in feasibility. So this Morocco study will absolutely come first. The vote on the vote by the board to even proceed into feasibility. I got to be careful with these words. We're in eligibility now. Ellen, that date, isn't it December 28th? Is that right?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are, remember, we got notified in December that we were being invited into eligibility, but it's kind of like getting an invitation to a party, but the party doesn't start for 3 months. So eligibility didn't even start until April 1st, and then it's a 270-day phase. Mm-hmm. So this is really, and just to be really clear, and this may have been a point Brian was trying to sort of maybe cast a little light on. This is not a design or engineering exercise. This doesn't require any drawings, any specifications. This is This requires words. I imagine kind of a narrative report. This requires a team to come in and talk about the relative importance of one building system or component over the other, the value of doing it now versus later, which is something I think the Capital Planning Committee is really interested in. You know, I think they all embrace as a committee this idea that we will need to put a new roof on Morocco before we replace the building. Just give it's the next roof that's coming. So certainly to the extent you can buy a roof now, you'll save money versus buying it 5 years from now. And I think there's also an interest in kind of getting the value right out of this investment. So all the more reason to spend the money now to get the value out of it. So this is what we need some help with. Is it, if it's I expect a roof would be included. I don't want to prejudge it, but if it's a roof, is it also windows? Is it a roof? Is it windows? Is it a boiler? Is it some flashings? Is it, you know, a water distribution system? The pipes at Morocco, unlike Lynch, are not cast in concrete. There's a crawl space under the building. How do the pipes look? So these are all the things I think we kind of need the input on. So I don't know if that really answers you. Almost by default, because of the Lynch schedule, this would absolutely come first.
It helps to, I didn't realize the narrow focus of this study. I thought it was broader. So thank you for helping clear that up.
You bet.
And I think it's really useful to think of in terms of how we use the UMass Donahue Institute to sort of confirm our enrollment numbers, and how going sort of outside the town, we have such incredible expertise in the DPW and the staff we have inside town that has identified a lot of the things that we know about Morocco, as Chris noted, through the information that they keep. But I think going outside and having an expert group from the outside come in and take a look at that too, and reconfirming for us what our priorities are, and really identifying those would really help us out if we need to go to the community to get a roof or another major system upgrade for Morocco as well. Are there any other questions or concerns? Okay, I'm happy to take a motion on Article 10 if somebody's willing to make one.
I'm happy to make the same motion I made at Capitol, which is that the committee recommend favorable action on Article 10 to town meeting.
Second.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. That's unanimous, and I think that is the last item on our agenda tonight. Thank you very much, everyone. If you did not receive the notice from Dr. Evans, this means that we will not have a meeting on June 2nd. I believe our next meeting will be the morning of town meeting, is when we'll try to schedule the meeting for town meeting day so that we can convene just before the first ever remote town meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
I move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a great weekend.
Have a nice weekend, everyone.
And
Bye, Zena.